Well, here it is, my 1955 Piaggio Vespa Ape, or what's left of it. This is what they look like when they're really nice and restored and in great shape. This one here is a Calacino. It's got a lovely carriage on the back of it, and that's handmade by some serious craftspeople. I'm not sure if this is the direction I want to go. It's very complicated and expensive. You can go with a nice wood box like this person did, or if you're lucky you can find something that looks a little older, or you can make your own crazy custom reverse carriage like this person did, which is kind of cool. But I like the flatbed, and this is the direction that I want to go, because you can put other scooters on it. And the original version of this right here was actually built to display two scooters, which is very, very cool in my opinion. Back to mine, it showed up like this, but falling apart with a bunch of parts and boxes. And as you can see, this is a huge, huge project. So it begs the question, where do you even start with something like this that you've never worked on before, have no idea how it's put together, and is in such bad shape? Now, the focus of this video today is going to be on just disassembly. Just taking this apart properly and seeing what it needs. To start off with, I spent an hour and a half removing these little screws with some heat and a impact driver. And here I am looking at the rear suspension that's coming off. These are actually friction shocks. They're not like shock absorbers. They're plates that rub against each other and hold the bed up from the rear wheels. These rear hubs have these long chain guards in them. This piece here is not in terrible shape, although this part of it was really rough. The other one was in way worse shape, and as you can see in this picture, it's missing large chunks of the aluminum where that yellow line is. That's really bad news because the aluminum is so old. Here you can see more of the corruption. I think these parts were sitting in the ground for quite a long time. This is a cotter pin that's supposed to be holding it together, and you can see it's all completely gone. Fortunately for me, I know a guy who's a great TIG welder, and he was able to do some serious repairs on these hubs for me. I'm using a crank puller here to remove the axles, and that worked out actually really well. We got the axles out no problem, and here it is. It's one of them. There's actually two. And here's the chain guards and the hubs removed. Really interesting engineering on this. They were, of course, filthy and needed a lot of work to get clean. Cleaning is a huge part of restoring a bike like this. Okay, we need to talk about this. Of all the things I've ever done working on bikes, this was by far the hardest. This brake pedal, it actually goes through a tube in the center of the frame, and it was seized solid. The whole inside of the tube was seized. So this is how we got it apart. The other end of it comes out the other side of the channel, and I was able to hammer that off, and I damaged it quite a bit, but it did come off. Then I had to apply some blue torch to try and get this to actually move and heat it up a lot. And at this point, I've hit it with a hammer a few times. This is me under the channel heating up the actual tube, and now we're getting it to come out a little bit and a little bit more. And I will say at this point, this is about 4 days in. 4 days of me hammering on this with a sledgehammer and heating it and penetrating oil. And there it is out. Unfortunately, with all the hammering, I bent it, and that's not very good. So I reached out to some knowledgeable people, and they told me to get the yellow wrench on it, heat it up till it was cherry hot, and then stick it in a vise to straighten it out. And that's what we did, and we actually got it really, really straight. The splines on the end were completely destroyed, and that was a lot of file work. Tedious file work, getting those back to any kind of operational setting. Yeah, lots of file work. The motor was in very bad shape, what was left of it. So much so that I actually made a bad decision and bought a second motor, and it was in worse shape. This is not how the gear selector is supposed to look. It's handmade and it's monkeyed with. These are giant holes cut in for the gear selector, which shouldn't be there. This is what's left of the castellated nut. Here's a giant hole in the crankcase that somebody TIG welded. This kick-starting mechanism just looks like garbage. And someone put these handy holes in the crankcases to put screwdrivers in to get the flywheel off. And here's the stator plate, which is a disaster. So I started taking the best parts of both engines and doing what I could to get them cleaned up a little bit. It's a great deal of work to try and get usable parts out of both of these garbage engines. But eventually they start getting cleaned up and disassembled and all the parts removed, and they start becoming usable. There's no cracks in them, and the one set of cases was pretty healthy. This is the differential with the engine getting cleaned up. It was completely usable, thank God. Nothing about it was broken. And that's all good news. Now we can talk about the frame, Swiss cheese that it is. There was only one thing to do, and that was, of course, to take this floor off. Unfortunately, it's spot welded with industrial plates all over it. Look at all those spot welds. There's only one way to get spot welds out, and that's with a spot weld drill bit. So we are talking about a good month worth of work in my basement of me spending a couple hours after work drilling out spot welds and hammering in a chisel to get these just to get the plates off, let alone the floors. These plates are reinforced for strength so the frame doesn't twist. Here we have all the rotten floor off, and we're trying to clean this up a little bit. And there's the replacement floor. We're trying to see how that fits on there before it gets shipped off. And you know, there's endless hours put into just removing this floor. So much physical labor. And yeah, here we are. You know, more. Look at all those holes I had to drill. No fun whatsoever. So I sent it off to Scoot Art in Montreal, and here it is sandblasted at the painters. The fork, like most wide frame forks, it's got to be completely, you know, disassembled. They're very old, very worn out. So here we are taking this all apart. And again, not a lot of fun, a lot of heat, a lot of penetrating oil, a lot of tapping, and a lot of patience so you don't break things. You can't break a hub like that. You'll never find a replacement. And it's got the nice Faro Basso headlight, which, you know, has a few dents, but actually not in bad shape. And here are the floor rails. These are very similar to the All-State scooters that were sold in the States. So much so that I'm just using a set off an All-State scooter for my Abe. It's like $1,000 to buy a new set, and I'm just not doing that. And there we are, everything completely disassembled. The next video is going to be about fixing things, cleaning things, and prepping things, and trying to reassemble them to make sure they work correctly before we actually try and paint and finish this thing. And that in and of itself is an entirely different story, so stay tuned.